This is a Media Lab podcast. Welcome to Putting Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. I am so excited to have Thom Sesma back on the podcast. Primary among those reasons is that he has actually played Sweeney Todd a few times in the past, so he brings some great insight into it. To let you know, this is actually the second time we recorded this episode. Because of my schedule, I wanted to do a bunch of recordings here a couple of months ago, and so we did. We met, we recorded the episode, and then a few days later was when, tragically, Stephen Sondheim passed away. And so we both decided that it was probably a good idea to reconvene to talk about the song in that context because it had changed. So that's what you're going to hear in this episode is the second time we recorded this episode. For Patreon supporters, you will hear the full uncut version of the first episode. So if you want to compare notes, see if we talked about anything differently, that is another bonus that you can have over there on Patreon. Hopefully you enjoyed the Sondheim adjacent episode on Tick Tick Boom here just a few days ago. That was fun. So if you somehow skipped that or did not see that in your podcast feed, definitely go back and listen to that episode with Eric Matthew Richardson. I think it was a pretty fun conversation around that show. This is a long episode, so we shouldn't dilly-dally any longer. Let's jump into my conversation with Thom Sesma about the song My Friends.
Them handles is chase silver, ain't they?
Silver, yes. These are my friends. See how they glisten. See this one.
Thom Sesma, thank you so much for joining me here again.
Hey, thank you, Kyle. It's always a pleasure to come back.
You know, I'm going to pull the curtain back here a little bit. I probably already mentioned it in the intro to this episode, but we have decided to kind of re-record our episode here together. We had actually spent a good bunch of time here a couple weeks ago. But in the intervening time, of course, I guess somewhat old news for people that are listening to this in sequence, but like Stephen Sondheim did pass away just last week as we're recording this here together. And I thought it was appropriate to be like, okay, this kind of does change the conversation a little bit on how we want to approach this song. So I just want to start there. I'm sure that in New York City, it's a very different feel that's going on in the theater community right now. I don't know what you can say or speak to that.
I think it's the same as it's been for everyone who loved Sondheim's work and who has been influenced in some way, whether in their own work or whether in their sense of appreciation for the theater and for the musical theater. Mm-hmm. I think it hit all of us much more deeply than any of us anticipated. He was 91 years old, you know. We don't have any details on why he passed away other than the fact that he died of being 91 years old. Right. And he left us peacefully and quietly after a wonderful Thanksgiving day here in the States the day before. And all of us knew that this was going to happen someday. Mm-hmm. I think what really surprised us is that the center of our theatrical universe shifted in a very sudden way. I think we all felt a grief that none of us ever felt before. The wonderful accident, the weird, wonderful thing about that is that what most of us glean from Sondheim's work are an awareness and an acknowledgement of feelings that we knew we had, but could never really articulate or recognize. Sondheim did that for us. His work did that for us. He expressed things that somehow maybe we knew in some infinitesimal way, but we never really knew it. We never really owned it until we heard how he expressed it. You know, whether that was something out of Being Alive or Loving You, or something obscure as the way a person's consciousness changes in, for instance, A Bowler Hat, all of a sudden,
Yeah.
it's not just great music and a great song and a great lyric. We recognize, we empathize with the characters singing with it because we connect with exactly what they're saying on a deep experiential level. When the creator of something like that is gone, when the interpreter of our emotional lives is taken from us, it affects us in a deeper way. It plays tricks with our DNA. It's almost as if our identities shift in some way. I don't want to belabor this. I don't want this to be a sad conversation in any respect,
Sure.
but I think it's the roundabout way of saying what's happening here in New York is only different in terms of the magnitude of our investment in industry, in the business, the work on the boulevard, as you might say. The New York theatrical community is a very, very insular family. We are all attached in some way to Sondheim. You play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. We can all play 6 Degrees of Stephen Sondheim. And I think it's even closer for all of us. So in a weird way, we felt like we lost a family member here.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that keeps, I guess, impressing me is kind of why this was such shocking news for a 91-year-old man to pass away, is that there still seemed to be a vibrancy behind him. Like, he had gone and seen his own show, Company, right, the week before. We'd also gone and seen 2 new plays that were playing at the time as well. Like, he was such a fan of just the art form of theater. And I think one of the other benefits of this is everyone posting the letters that they've received from him over the years of being encouraging, about being a champion of this. And I think sometimes what can happen, whether we're talking about theater or movies or whatever, the older you get, sometimes the more entrenched in your opinions you get. And he was one of the few who was like, no, like, let's keep celebrating the new and the new voices that are coming out and the different things that are being challenged here on the stage, and willing to stick his neck out for that a little bit as well. So yeah, I just love seeing all those letters get posted around here over the last few days.
It's interesting. Yeah, I believe somewhere in town right now there's an exhibition or there's a show in some gallery or museum of selected letters from Sondheim. I just read about that in passing. I don't know if it's actually happening or if that's something that somebody proposed, but it certainly seems like a worthwhile thing. I can't wait for someone to actually publish the selected letters of Stephen Sondheim.
Yeah,
I'm
sure it'll come.
I don't know that he kept a diary or a journal, or if he recorded things in his life. I think that he probably expressed so much of his life through his work that he doesn't need that. But, that would be required reading for all of us too, the diaries of Stephen Sondheim. He was quite a presence. He's imprinted on our DNA, the DNA of most creative people in the theater, whether they realize it or not. But at the same time, a friend of mine on social media put it best. He says, there aren't many people who are 91 years old who pass away about whom you can say they left us much too soon.
Yeah, so true. So true. Now, I can't remember if I've ever asked you this before. Like, certainly you have been in Sondheim shows before, but did you ever get the chance to meet him before?
Oh my God, many times. Yeah. Yeah, we had plenty of conversations, not in depth, not real personal conversations. I wouldn't count him as a close friend or even a friend. I don't know how you qualify that word anymore, given how we overuse that word on social media. But we were friendly acquaintances. He knew me by name. He would call me out in a crowded room, and we referred to each other as Steve and Tom. So there's a personal loss as well. He was always, always very kind to me, even when I was young and full of salt and probably not that easy to get along with. And certainly over the last few years, when I had the opportunity to perform in the off-Broadway revival of Pacific Overtures and then the off-Broadway revival of Sweeney Todd, which he came to see several times. And he was very, very helpful, gave us notes, was extremely appreciative. Then we did the performance of Someone in a Tree on the Sondheim 90th live stream, and he sent us all a very, very nice email after that. I never got a typewritten letter, but I did get a couple of emails from him.
You can print those off and post them somewhere. Yeah.
I remember that morning when we all got the email, the four of us contacted each other, and we were texting back and forth saying, I got this email from Sondheim we were just all flabbergasted and pleased. That was the kind of effect that he had on people. You know, if he would shine his light in your direction, and all of a sudden it just filled you with life and light and pride and humility all at once. It was extraordinary.
One of the other things I think has been coming out here too is, of course, like I have an entire podcast is centered around like his lyrics and his music, but also I think it should not be forgotten that part of the reason why we revere this man so much is because of his collaborators, whether it's the people who helped direct it, who helped orchestrate it, who helped conduct his music, but also the actors who have helped bring those roles to life. And you happen to have a very close connection with Mr. Sweeney Todd, who we're going to be talking about in today's episode. Because you have had the opportunity, it's twice, right, that you've played, or three times? Actually,
I've done, let me see. I should have been prepared for this question. Yeah. I did it in 1998. It was a co-production between Repertory Theater St. Louis and Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park. I did a concert version of it for the Kentucky Symphony. I did a version of it at the Arden Theater in Philadelphia. So what is that so far? That's 3. And then I did it off Broadway. So I've done it 4 times. And over a span of years, I was, in 1998, that was quite a while ago. I was relatively young. The last time I did it, I was very much a different actor, very much a different person from the time I was in 1998. So I went on my own journey just in the same way, and I took the character with me on that journey. He was a very, very different Sweeney Todd.
That was what I was so super curious about. Like, how do you approach this character in your younger years versus the most recent time you got to do it?
Yeah, I think the first time I did it was relatively, I don't want to say that it was easy because it's not an easy role to do. I don't think anything is an easy role to do, whether it's the one I'm doing now, Mr. Scrooge, or Sweeney Todd. They all have their complexities and you all have to make them real. But way back in 1998, the memory of Hal Prince's original production of Sweeney Todd was very vivid and very clear in our minds. That was the template. That was what everybody remembered. And I think for the most part, every theater that was producing any version of Sweeney Todd was sort of doing the blueprinted version of Sweeney Todd that Hal Prince had left for us. It certainly was the case at Repertory Theater St. Louis. I don't want to take anything away from that production. I think it was fantastic. It was directed by Ed Stern, who was the artistic director of Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, where incidentally, the original home of the John Doyle version of Company, starring Raul Esparza. Right. Back in 98, Ed directed Sweeney Todd Pamela Myers, who originated the role of, I think, Marta in Company. She sang Another 100 People. She was my Mrs. Lovett. And it was a wonderful cast. It was a wonderful design. It was a wonderful concept. But essentially, it was a shrunk-down version of Hal Prince's approach to it. When I did the play in 2018, it was impossible to do it in that way. It was impossible to think of it in that way, even if I had wanted to.
Because this was the one in the pie shop, right?
The Barrow Street Theater, where I had done a play before, several years prior to that, had been gutted and a pie shop had been built in its place. And this site-specific version of Sweeney Todd lived there. And the audience experienced it on a completely different level. It was, number one, it was Sweeney Todd in a true sense. It was a real play, but at the same time, it had what you might call this gimmick of being site-specific. It was a real pie shop. Meals were served there. People were immersed in this. The action took place on the tables, on the staircase, in the doorway leading to the theater. It took place in the lobby. It took place everywhere. And you took the audience on a journey which they would not have experienced in a normal theater. In a way, we got closer to the heart of the fun that Steve originally envisioned as a part of this play, as an element of this play, because the audience was on for the ride of their lives. And they weren't just sitting in seats. They were actually, well, how can I put this? They actually had sharp blades to their necks in this production.
Yeah.
So it was different in that sense. The other thing that made it different for me is that I was a different person. I had gone through a lot of changes in my life, from however long, however many years 1998 was ago. And here I was 30 years later. I had experienced loss. I experienced grief. I had experienced a more mature kind of joy and self-discovery. Truth be told, when I was asked to audition for it, I initially didn't want to do it because I had seen it. And I thought to myself, "Ooh, I'm glad I got that behind me because I never want to work that hard again."
Yeah.
But then I read the material, and it was as if I had never experienced this material before because I had changed so much in my life. What material did they ask me to prepare for the audition? The song that we're going to talk about right now, My Friends, and the scene in which he discovers what happens to Lucy and Joanna, according to Mrs. Lovett, at least. And once I read that material as someone who had been through a number of different experiences in my life, I couldn't wait to do it. I couldn't wait to have the chance to dig into this material because, as I said, I felt like I had never read it before or heard it before. It was brand new to me, and it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And I auditioned, I got the role, and the rest, as they say, is history. It was a remarkable journey. It was a 6-month journey of exploration into the text, exploration into myself, becoming great friends with Sally Ann Triplett, who played Mrs. Lovett. Who was still one of my dearest friends, and a nice reunion with Steve, who had never seen me do anything of that magnitude, who couldn't have been more pleased and more happy with the work that I was doing. We had a couple nice conversations about it, one of which reminded me that he was such an odd man. He was such a kind man. He was odd in the sense that he didn't live up to your expectations of this great, serious artist. He was so full of joy at the work he had done and at seeing people do his work well. All he really cared about from me was whether I was having fun. He came up to me after he saw me the first time. And I think he saw me 4 times, but he came up to me after the first time. And every time I saw Steve over the years, I was really kind of embarrassed. I never knew what to say. I would not be able to have, it was almost like I had a crush on him. I just simply didn't know how to have a real conversation with him. And I always thought, oh, I have to say something important, right? So when he came up to me after the show, he said a couple nice things about my work and asked me how I was doing, asked me what I thought. And I tried to say something smart. I don't even remember what came out of my mouth. I'm sure it was just nonsense, but I tried to say something smart about the character and about a particular moment in the play. And he looked at me and he cocked his head with this funny look on his face. He said, "Oh, I don't care about any of that. Are you having fun? Are you having a good time? Because you're supposed to be having fun." It caught me by surprise. And I'm still a little embarrassed when I think about that because I simply didn't know what to say. Steve, wherever you are, I'm still having fun.
It's half the battle, right? This is a little bit of a leading the witness a little bit how I'm going to phrase this next question, because one of the things that you brought up in our previous conversation that I thought was so interesting is there is, of course, we call the character Sweeney Todd, but that's actually not his real name. And so there is kind of this like 2 sides of the same person. There's the Benjamin Barker and then there's the Sweeney Todd, like alter ego sort of thing. And it's when you choose when to be those 2 different characters. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that.
Sure, I would
in
love
any way.
to. I mean, to sort of go back to the question you asked before, what's the difference between playing it in 1998 and playing it 30 years later? I think the biggest difference was in 1998, I was doing what everyone else was doing, and I was playing Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber. And in 2018, I was playing Benjamin Barker because I realized, I think, and I can say this out loud now because Steve's not around to disagree with me in case I'm wrong. I think the key to doing this play correctly is not to play Sweeney Todd, is to play Benjamin Barker. That's the journey we're following, how this man becomes Sweeney Todd and what happens when he becomes Sweeney Todd. I'll tell you what happens when he becomes Sweeney Todd. It's the wheels come off. I know I said that a lot in our last conversation, but that's when he doesn't quite have control of the situation. It's easy for us to talk about loss and grief and the fact that his life has been wrenched away. That's essentially the heart of the play. I think in many respects, you see it in the Joanna Quartet in Act 2, when he's just going through the motions as Sweeney Todd. But the song he sings does not come out of the mouth of Sweeney Todd. Rather, it comes out of the heart of Benjamin Barker.
Right.
His mind, his heart, his attention is on his lost daughter. And at the end of that song, he lets her go, or he tries to let her go. He doesn't entirely let her go, of course, because the play would be over. That's how he has to exist from now on. But you can't play that song as Sweeney Todd. You have to be Benjamin Barker. I think in a nutshell, that's what that is. You will find, I think to any actor out there who's going to play the role, you'll find your own journey. You'll find your own way into Sweeney Todd. But for the most part, if you're in a hurry to play Sweeney Todd, you're going to be missing a universe of discovery to make as an actor, as a person.
I think that was my realization too the last time we spoke, which was, I think that there is that realization at the very end during the final sequence when he finally gets the judge, right? He doesn't, sure, it's the judge finally recognizing who he is for the first time, but he's like, this is Benjamin Barker.
Right.
Like he finally announces his entrance into the play, right. But he's kind of been there the entire time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, I've never really thought about this before until you mentioned this just now, but it's fun to unpack all this, isn't it? But Benjamin Barker starts the play with a mission. He's going to find his daughter. He's going to find out what happens to his wife and daughter. And when he finds out, he's going to kill the judge. That's his mission. Everybody else he kills, after Pirelli, of course, everybody else he kills. Yeah. Sweeney Todd is doing that. It's not quite working out for him, but Sweeney Todd is doing that. Right. But when the judge comes back, he tries to reclaim who he was, which is Benjamin Barker. That's such an interesting insight. Right. I never really thought about it before.
That is now trademarked. You have to pay me if you ever do that.
I will be happy to, Kyle. I'm going to have to pay you a lot because I've gotten so much out of so many of the other podcasts that you've left us. So.
Well, thank you. We're of course talking about the song "My Friends." So this is, Mrs. Lovett showing him, "Hey, you've left behind these razors. Here they are again." I think I asked you this last time too, but it's kind of somewhat silly. But because you do have to use those razors the entire time throughout the show, they do actually become a prop, an extension that you have to be kind of ultimately using. For you, I guess, as an actor, having that razor with you the entire time, how does that aid your performance?
Every role that you play, if you have a prop, you have to have a real relationship to it. It might be something as simple as a spoon in a kitchen that you stir your coffee with in a kitchen sink drama. It has to be real for you. It has to mean something. And that's magnified by these razors because they're elemental to who he is. He even says at one point, "At last, my right arm is complete again." His identity is wrapped up in shaving people. And later on, he attempts to add killing people to that. So in the respect of being an actor, you have to have that relationship. Technically, it's a nightmare because the razors have to work in some way. It was easiest in 2018, which I'll get to. It was harder in every other iteration of this because directors and prop departments want this fabulous blood effect because so many people expect that in Sweeney Todd. So usually what they do is they construct something where there is a bladder inside the handle of the razor. The razor itself is a vessel with little holes in it. You somehow trigger the bladder. Blood comes out of these holes on cue, and it goes all over the person whose neck you're slicing. Sounds easy, really complicated, really hard to do well. And I think in many respects, that's why most productions of Sweeney Todd have these huge razors that look more like butcher knives than razors, which makes it hard for the actor to develop a relationship with that prop because it's so obviously a prop and not something that looks like it could actually shave someone. I was having a lot of problems with that in 1998. So I kept trying to come up with a solution because the razors that they built, which they spent a lot of money building, simply, maybe they looked great from the audience, but they didn't help me, the actor. So I kept trying to think of something else. So what I did is I went to the drugstore and I bought a couple of these little rubber bladders. They look like little light bulbs. And I palmed it in my hand and held it against the handle of a smaller razor. I filled it with water and I squeezed the bladder. all the water came out. It hit the blade and it rebounded onto whatever I was cutting with. I was using a balloon to practice with. And I said, oh, this is interesting. So I went to the head of the prop department and I asked him to fill it with blood, with stage blood. And it worked like gangbusters. It was scary. I called Ed. I said, Ed, can we have a meeting about this? And he was really annoyed with me at this point because I just wasn't getting it with these prop razors and I was giving him a lot of trouble. And I said, Ed, I apologize for this. Listen, you're in charge. You decide. I just want to show you what I have. And I showed him this effect with this little rubber thing that I was holding in my hand. And he gasped out loud when all this blood shot out because it was so horrifying that he finally realized he had the fact. So in essence, you go to the drugstore, you buy a $2 little rubber thing, you hold it in your hand, and that's how it worked for us. And I repeated that at the Arden in 2005, I think I did it then. And so that's how we got away with that. In 2018, I discovered that you don't need blood at all. Here we were in small quarters in a pie shop. We're inches away from everyone in the audience. You're swinging a razor inches away from somebody's actual neck. That's scary enough. And you didn't need to see blood until the very end. And what I found out is the blood effect that they used was very similar to the blood effect that I used. And it was only a little bit of blood. It wasn't a lot. It didn't have to gush out in the same way that the original production did because it didn't have to reach an audience that was, didn't have to reach a back row that was far, far away. It just needed to be read, really. And it was horrifying. But then again, I think that that's the power of the play. You make a suggestion. Sondheim and Hugh Wheeler made the suggestion enough times that this was a horrible murder. The audience sees the razor. They see a bare neck. They do the rest of the work.
Yeah, it's a super fascinating thing I find about live theater in particular, right? Like as soon as you sit down, you're kind of making this nonverbal contract. Like what I'm seeing here is this imaginative thing. Like I'm suspending my disbelief to such a degree. I actually just went and saw, I know you're doing kind of a version of A Christmas Carol kind of mixed with Sherlock Holmes right now. I just went and watched the regular Christmas Carol at my local theater here. And they've reduced it somewhat due to COVID, but there's only 3 actors on stage for the entire of A Christmas Carol, and they just flip out the different characters and stuff that they need to be. And I was sat there amazed because like when I was first told this, I was like, is this going to work? And I was like 5 minutes in, like, oh yeah, this totally works. Like I totally get who that person is, and now they've changed, and now they're this person. And I think the same thing is true with like violence or blood or something like that. If you let them know like this is horrific, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm imagining now there's blood pouring out. Like I do so much of the work as an audience member at that point. Like you don't really need to overdo it. In
many respects, it gets back to Steve's original concept for the show, which is an evening of Grand Guignol theater, which, yeah, it has a dark side. It's scary, but it's basically fun for the audience to be there. And why is it fun for the audience to be there? Not because you're showing them so much, but you're actually asking them to participate in a different way. They get to make the theater. Sure. The fear, you can't manufacture fear as a theater maker. The audience brings that component. You can show them something that's scary. You can suggest things that might make them feel a little edgy, but they bring their own fear to it. You just have to trigger it in some way. The minute you show them too much blood, they're not scared anymore. They're just watching something. They're just witnessing something, but they're not experiencing it. I was first taught this late in my career by Julie Taymor when I did The Lion King. She asked a very interesting question to the cast. She was very happy with all the work we were doing. I was playing Scar. But she said, something's missing. All of you are missing one basic element. And she said, and that's why you're working too hard. She said, what's the first thing you see in the show? One of the first things you see after the giraffes in The Lion King, you see a cheetah come on stage. It is a cheetah puppet operated by a dancer. The production makes no attempt to hide the dancer. She is controlling the puppet with these long poles. And she says, what does the audience see? That was Julie's question was, what does the audience see? Did they see the puppet? Are they watching the puppet? Are they watching the dancer? And none of us got what she was really asking. And she said, I'll tell you. She said, they're watching the cheetah, but the cheetah's not there. They're making the cheetah in their mind.
Right.
That's what you're supposed to do in the theater. You leave the audience enough room so that they can make things in their minds. And I think it's something that theater is really moving away from nowadays. It's getting to be like movies. It's getting to be a little bit too realistic. There's a little bit too much technology, too much money in recreating a naturalistic experience on stage that the audience can watch so they don't have to do much work. And it's perfectly valid. It's just a different kind of experience. And I think Sweeney Todd is a lot of that. I think the original production, suffers from a surfeit of things, of information. I think that's why when Steve saw the Pie Shop production of Sweeney Todd at the Tooting Arts Theatre in London years ago, that's why he said, this is as close as it's ever going to get to my original concept for Sweeney Todd, because so much was suggested. Even the blood just wasn't there. It wasn't necessary because the audience was seeing blood in their mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but, and I know this is a roundabout way of getting back to what we were talking about, which was my relationship with those razors. That was something that was part of that. That was part of that suggestion. How do I imbue this with a sense of danger? Well, you can't say, oh, this is a razor, it's dangerous. It's a razor, it's already dangerous. There has to be something else. It has to be an extension of his loss. It has to be an extension of his grief. It has to be an extension of his desire to get what he needs. That's what makes it scary. And I think in a roundabout way, that's what that song is about. When he sees those razors, he sees his identity in them. And how does that identity shift in the course of that song is the great task for the actor to discover.
Hi everyone, just Kyle breaking into the conversation to thank some of the people and organizations that help this show continue to go. If you would like to help support the show for absolutely free, you can give a rating and review on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. It's greatly appreciated. It is still the best way for the show to organically find more people to listen to it, which is always a great thing, to share this with other people. If you'd like to help monetarily, which will only help to make this show become better, you can do so over at our Patreon page. Please do not donate if it impacts you negatively financially. And by the way, we do have a new patron this week, so thank you so much, Corey, for joining us over there. And of course, as always, a big thank you to the God That's Good tier from Patreon, the Suave Sextet of Jack, Todd, Carrie, Woody, Louise, and Christopher. Putting Together is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This week, we are brought to you by ATB, specifically how they are built to help Albertans. At ATB, we make banking work for you with expert and practical advice in everyday banking and investment planning expertise and management services with ATB Wealth. You can be confident that you're making smart choices when it comes to your money. We have a history of doing what's right for our clients, especially when times are tough, because ATB was built to help Albertans. For more information, visit atb.com. This week we're also brought to you by Pod Power. With Pod Power, our sponsors are making it possible for us to amplify the voices of Albertans and Alberta podcasters. This episode, Edmonton Community Foundation is helping us give a Pod Power shout out to Book Women. Book Women is a podcast about editing, publishing, and writing Indigenous stories. 3 Métis librarians representing nations from across the homeland aim to inspire Indigenous people to share their stories in whatever form that they enjoy. Guests include Indigenous storytellers from diverse mediums like podcasting, burlesque, books, comics, social media, films, music, and everything in between. You can listen and find out more at bookwomenpodcast.ca. This is what Todd starts off with when he sees those razors for the first time. He sings, "These are my friends, see how they glisten. See this one shine, how he smiles in the light. My friend, my faithful friend, Speak to me, friend. Whisper, I'll listen. I know, you've been locked out of sight all these years, like me, my friend.
These are my friends. See how they glisten. See this one shine, how he smiles in the light. My friend, my faithful friend. Speak to me, friend. Whisper, I'll listen. I know you've been locked out of sight all these years, like me, my friend. Well,
Anytime there's a song where there's a specific word repeated over and over again, I have to be like, well, that must be important. And we have to hit on that. For you, I guess, yeah, like why friend and not another word in this case? Like, why are these his friends?
He could always rely on them. I think from his youth, I'm sure, from his days as apprenticing as a barber. That's all actor backstory. You know, actors always have to come up with at least a vague idea of who they were, where they came from. And I certainly think that that's a part of it. But I also think that there's something that's true about one's relationship with an inanimate object. That thing, that razor, in this case, can't lie. It can't deceive. It's I take care of you, you take care of me. There's a contract there that's inviolable. That has always been, and in a strange way, always will be, for as long as he's able to do it, able to be a barber. And I think in many respects, that's it.
Yeah, it feels like some of those different professions, like, I don't know, whether you're a baker and have a favorite rolling pin or a favorite bowl or something like that, or you're like a mechanic who has a favorite wrench. There's nothing necessarily different from it than another one you can buy, but it just feels like it's dependable. Like I go to this one, it's never failed me. It fits well in my hand or whatever it happens to be. It's like this ephemeral thing, even though it's an inanimate object, can't really speak to you or anything in words or anything, but it's like, no, I feel like this is just an extension of my body.
Right. And it's also a relationship that no one else understands. So this is insight into this, you know, a part of the song is insight into something that nobody else really understands about his relationship with that thing.
I always like the idea too, like there's a lot of metaphor and simile and stuff that's going on in this song in particular. The way that he holds it up, right? You smile in the light, but then also like whisper to me and I'll listen to you. Mm-hmm. Like there is this idea of anthropomorphizing this razor a little bit to the degree where it's like it does feel like he's speaking to someone. Yeah,
there is a little double meaning in there. There's a little inner joke in there because I don't remember what it is. There is an allusion in literature to whispers that razors make. So that's kind of a lift that Steve is using there. But it's appropriate because he is conversing with this. He is having a conversation. He's hearing things that only he can hear because of his relationship with the razor. And what's lovely about it is that he's singing this song, which turns into a duet. And I know you're going to get to that, but it's not like two people are singing to each other. They're just singing at the same time.
It's basically two separate monologues overlapped with one another.
We spoke about this last time. It's almost like a callback to two soliloquies in South Pacific that Oscar Harrison and Richard Rogers wrote. You know, these two people are sharing their thoughts with us. Neither one of them is really singing out loud, or speaking out loud, I should say.
Well, to that point here, so Todd kind of introduces that and says, well, I've come home to find you waiting home, and we're together and we'll do wonders, won't we? And then the first half of those two monologues, Todd is singing, you there, my friend, come let me hold you. Now, with a sigh, you grow warm in my hand, my friend, my clever friend. Whereas Mrs. Lovett is singing, I'm your friend too, Mr. Todd. If you only knew, Mr. Todd, oh, Mr. Todd, you're warm in my hand. You've come home. Always had a fondness for you, I did.
Well, I've come home to find you waiting. Home
you.
you only
Now,
Mr.
with
Todd,
a sigh,
Mr.
you
Todd,
grow
you're
warm in my hand, my friend, my clever
always had a
friend.
fondness for you, I did.
Rest now.
I think the last time too we spoke a bit about that idea of home, right? I think that's such a powerful word to sing.
I have to tell you, I get such pleasure out of singing that word in this song. There's something about the note, there's something about the where it happens in the music, there's something about the release, the vocal release on that vowel is so stimulating, is so exciting. In a weird way, I think that that's the first peak of the song. That's his first real emotional release. And to all you singers out there, all you singers out there, enjoy singing that note because that's a real release. They say that babies, when they're learning how to use their voices, they do things like la 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 la. This is what babies do. And child psychologists will say you that they do that because it feels good physically and emotionally. That's what I would say about getting to that note where you sing home, because I've come home to find you waiting home, and we're together and we'll do wonders, won't we? It's that kind of primal release when you sing that note. And I think that Sondheim knew that when he wrote it. I think Sondheim knew that the instrument, that the vocal instrument needs that kind of expression.
Well, what's interesting too, like just thinking about like the music in this song too, like the lead up to that note, there's not a lot of variation here. It's like, these are my friends, see how they glisten. Like you're kind of ramping yourself up until you finally get to that home. And that's when you get to that great crescendo up into that. The other word that I have to say, just because both Mrs. Lovett and Todd do say it, is the idea of warm. Which obviously, yes, like the razor's going to warm up in your hand as you hold it. But Mrs. Lovett saying that you're warm in my hand too, Mr. Todd, is interesting for a few different reasons, because it's good that we're re-recording, because I didn't bring this up the last time. It really does feel like subtly what Sondheim trying to communicate, and what you find out later is that Mrs. Lovett is using Sweeney Todd as her instrument of death as well, because she's not the one who's going and actually slitting the throats. So it's really fascinating, I find, how they're using those two warm for the same thing, actually.
Well, they're both lonely people. They're both kind of lost.
That's true.
And they find themselves through, actions that the other provides for them, for them. She's such a monster. She's such a sad monster.
That's what makes her so fascinating to me, though, is like this woman who's waited 15 years, and then what she wants to happen actually does happen, and then it still spirals out of control,
right,
for her.
You think about what a remarkable accident that he walked into the store and she was there. She told him what happened. At least she told him her version of what happened, and then she invited him to stay, and the rest follows. And again, let's go back to that initial conversation that we were having. Who does she invite to stay? Benjamin Barker? Sweeney Todd? It's an interesting... I don't have an answer. It's just an interesting question.
Yeah, that would be an interesting question for someone who's played Mrs. Lovett. Obviously she had an infatuation with Benjamin Barker years ago. That seems pretty clear. But when he comes back, is she falling in love with Sweeney Todd, or is she still falling in love with Benjamin Barker? I think that's an interesting question that you could ask yourself too.
All of these questions are really helpful in rehearsal. It's one of the great things about being an actor working on a project is there are no rules about what questions you can ask. Marry yourself to any of the answers, because you might always be wrong. But you should always ask all of these questions, right? So I think it's really, really important. I worked with John Doyle, who was a close collaborator of Steve's on several productions, including revival of Sweeney Todd with Patti LuPone and Michael Cerveris several years ago.
Right.
And John is absolutely remarkable, because you can be working, and things be going really well. Let's say you've got a 6-hour day of rehearsal ahead of you, and after 2 hours, he just stops everything and he starts asking questions. because he wants you to ask questions about where this is all going, about what this all means. And he doesn't necessarily want you to have answers. And I think that that's the important thing. I don't think any of the answers to any of the questions that even you and I are talking about are necessarily that helpful for actors. I think the questions are important, but I think never knowing the answer will always keep you on beam, will always keep you on your toes, will always keep you working to get deeper and deeper. I can say the secret to Sweeney Todd is playing Benjamin Barker and not Sweeney Todd. But is that necessarily true? I don't know. It's true for me, but I don't want to settle on that for a definitive answer because I want to keep looking. I want to keep searching. I want to keep exploring, digging deeper. And most importantly, thank you, Steve Sondheim, I want to keep having fun. I want to keep having fun.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. You can't turn your search for getting this right into a kind of religion, into tenets of faith where you have to obey certain things. It always has to change.
This is me getting up on a little bit of a soapbox because I do think, even though I have such a deep respect for teachers, sometimes how I think English literature is approached incorrectly, especially for teenagers, where it's presented as there's like this hidden thing within this text and there's only one right answer. And I'm going to tell you what the right answer is to interpret this work. And I kind of really hate that because it's like, no, that's not what this is. It's like, how does this art speak to you? And give me those reasons of why it's speaking to you this way.
Well, that gets back to what I was saying about playing Sweeney Todd in 1998 and playing Sweeney Todd in 2018. They were different plays for me. It was a different experience for the actor and for the person because I had changed so differently. And back in 1998, you couldn't have convinced me there was another way to play Sweeney Todd back then because that was all I knew back then. It gets back to what you were saying earlier about, when Steve passed away, it seemed so sudden because he was so deeply involved in something. He had seen company, he'd seen 2 plays, he was engaged with his friends, he was working on a new play, which sadly will never be finished, but beautifully will never be finished too. He was writing letters, he was writing stories, he had engagements lined up. His life, the industry, the art form, was a living, breathing organism that he communicated with every day, that changed him every day. And because it changed him, it changed the organism itself. I was talking about that recently, prior to the play that I was doing now, the one I'm doing now, A Sherlock Carol. I did a new play by Rajiv Joseph called Letters of Suresh. It was at Second Stage. A beautiful play. I think one of the high points of my artistic career. Rajiv was in rehearsal almost every single day. Although I enjoy having the writer, the composer, the lyricist in rehearsal in the room when you're working, sometimes it's a little intrusive because in a weird way, sometimes they have their own ideas about what they want it to be and it's not turning out that way. Rajiv was the first person who I felt was treating the play as a living, breathing organism on its own, that was teaching him something new every day. And that would enable him to teach the play something new every day. It was exciting to watch. I think Steve was that way with the theater. I know he was that way with his work. I remember back in 1990, I believe, I was doing the revival of Merrily We Roll Along at the Arena Theater, at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. It was a very unfortunate production, but Steve was down there working on it, and we were working.
Unfortunate? Why?
It should have been terrific, and it wasn't for lots of reasons. But I remember we were working on the opening number, and Steve stopped us. How did you get there? From here, Mr. Shepard? What did you have to go through? What was the moment? And he stopped. He stopped on that line. He said, what was the moment? What was the moment? And we were all just watching him. And he pulled out a piece of paper, said, what was the moment? Which was the moment? What was the moment? Which was the moment? Which was the moment? You know, to say which was the moment is more correct because that implies something different from what was the moment. But his frustration was which was the moment didn't scan as well, even though it's the same number of syllables. And it was interesting to see that communication with the work, what he was learning, not just about what would be the correct expression, but what would be the correct scansion, how you weigh scansion against value. It was a thing of beauty to watch.
Yeah, that's
but
lovely.
It taught me again that you can't ever know the answers about this.
Well, that's why I always love different interpretations and why theater can be such a vibrant thing. Like in the film world, sometimes it's looked down upon to do like remakes or reinterpretations of older films. But I think in the theater, it's like kind of welcome to like, we're going to have a different interpretation, or different actors are going to step in. And each time you do that, I think, there's this different, not just a different interpretation, but sometimes even a deeper appreciation for it, because it's like, oh, I would never have thought of approaching it like this, but this actually allows for this moment to like have more resonance, or this thing is able to change and speak to a newer generation. I think that there is something beautiful about being able to redo works over the years.
Well, we're about to see that with one of Steve's works right now, the revival of Company. By the time people are listening to this podcast, it will have opened already, but the revival of Company, or I should say the revisal of Company, will be opening in the next couple of weeks. The gender reversed, rewritten Company. Right. And it's going to be very, very interesting. I don't know if it's going to be the same show at all. I don't know if it's going to be the show that I love.
Right.
That sort of introduced me to Sondheim. But whatever it's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be worth seeing and worth studying and worth listening to, because it's its own thing. Everything is its own thing. We were talking earlier about the questions that actors have to ask themselves. And one thing that frustrated me over and over and over in every production I've done is the question always came up: did Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd sleep together? In other words, did they consummate their relationship? And it always struck me as the wrong question. It always struck me as sort of a silly question. I never really answered it to myself because I didn't think it was important to the plot. I thought what I thought was really important. A more important question, if you're going to deal with questions like that, is not whether they slept together, but whether they ate the pies. But again, I don't want to dismiss those questions either one of those questions. I think you should still ask them. I don't think you have to know the answers, but I think they have to exist in your mind, in your reality in some way.
Well, this is how the song finishes. Mrs. Lovett is singing, "Never you fear, Mr. Todd. You can move in here, Mr. Todd. Splendors you never have dreamed. All your days will be yours. I'm your friend. Don't they shine beautiful? Silver's good enough for me, Mr. T." Whereas Todd is singing, "Rest now, my friends. Soon I'll unfold you. Soon you'll know splendors you never have dreamed all your days. My lucky friends, till now your shine was merely silver. Friends, you shall drip rubies. You'll soon drip precious rubies."
Never you fear, Mr. Todd. You can move in here, Mr. Todd. Splendors you never have dreamed all your days will be yours.
My lucky friend,
I'm your friend.
till now your shine was merely silver.
Silver's good enough for
Friends, you shall drip rubies. You'll soon drip precious rubies.
It's pretty clear that they're going on parallel journeys, but they're not in union with each other. Benjamin Barker is outlining his plan for his future. He wants to kill the judge. He's got a very specific set of goals, which is really great. If you can reduce what you want to do in life to a specific set of goals, it all seems pretty easy. But there's something greater going on, because that's not the consummation of the song for him. He doesn't even have one more verse. He just says, "You'll drip precious rubies." And then you have this gorgeous, gorgeous underscoring, which leads him to take out the razor, open it up, extend his arm, and cry to the heavens, "At last my right arm is complete again."
What's super fascinating about that line, the spoken line, is that both Len Cariou and George Hearn are both left-handed, which is why on the original Broadway cast, he only says, at last my arm is complete again. Yeah. And George Hearn does the same thing if you've watched the recorded version. In the script, it does say, like, my right arm is complete again, right, which Sondheim preferred. He liked them saying my right arm is complete again.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I mean, I grew up listening to Len Cariou. I watched George Hearn do it a couple times. It seared itself into my memory. And when I started learning it all 4 times, I had to unlearn it because it was so deeply ingrained in me. But at last my right arm is complete again is better. It is stronger. For me,
it's almost like similar to like my right hand man. Like that's kind of what it invokes here for me. Like that's what this razor is to me.
Right.
This is the question I asked last time here too, but to make you answer it again, I mean, obviously it's a metaphor for blood, but like, why rubies? Why does he say you're going to drip precious rubies rather than just saying you'll drip blood?
I don't know. It's certainly a thing of value. In a weird way, he could have said it's more precious than rubies, but that's what it is for him. That's what it, there is nothing untoward or awful about what he's going to do. There is nothing untoward about justice. He's on a noble mission.
This makes me just want to do like a deeper dive even more, because I know that rubies is also mentioned a couple more times throughout the show from other characters, but it might just be a nice little metaphor again to evoke that like blood red image. What's also interesting, I think, in these lyrics, at least in this last little bit, right, is like, till now your shine was merely silver. It was just silver, which is precious in itself, and now it'll also add on precious rubies, right. Silver rubies, 2 precious metals / gemstones. There's that metaphor that's, I think, being played around there too.
Yeah, but not just a metaphor. It's also, it's a thing that becomes something else. It's all about a journey, a razor that is just silver. The razor that is in a box is just silver, but a razor that's being used for the purpose of the person wielding the razor is something different. It's part of the arm. It has an end result. Now it has an end result, precious rubies. It's not just about shaving. And so ultimately you're saying that it's about his identity. That's his identity is wrapped up in there. This is great. If I ever play this role again, Kyle, you're really helping me out.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I just think for you at least here then, I mean, you have the insight of having played this character a few times. As far as the song My Friends goes, is this, top 5, middle 5 for you in the show? Like, how would you rate it?
I think in the canon of things I've done, it's in the top 3, maybe. It is it's a beautiful love song. It's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful song about identity. We talk a lot in the musical theater about, we categorize certain songs. This is an I want song. Right. Great I want songs. There's a long list of them. I don't think they get much better than this. Because what he wants is himself. And he achieves it at the end of the song. Who he is. Benjamin Barker. Holding up that razor. And what does he do at the end of the play? He says, Benjamin Barker, he screams. He holds up the razor and he uses it. Yeah. It's almost as if that moment when he slashes the judge's throat is an extension of this song.
That's right. And I mean, one other thing, I guess, just to kind of wrap up here with is I think every single song that is brought up in this show gets an echo somewhere later on, a lot of them in the second act, but definitely this one near the end of the show, right? Like, rest now, my friends, right? Like we've been able to see him when he first sees them and wakes them up and greets them, and then he's also able to put them to rest at the very end. So there's that kind of that mirroring of his journey through this song in particular.
Yeah, sometimes he's really good at echoing his music throughout the show, not just in this show, but in all of his shows. It's just kind of remarkable. And it's a very satisfying moment to go back to that again at the end.
Well, Thom, thank you so much for joining me here again. If people wanted to stay in contact with you, see what you're up to, what are the easiest ways for them to do that?
Visit my website, thomsesma.com, thomsesma.com. I would love it. And I try to answer all my correspondence. So if you want to write to me, you can write to me through the website. And I really appreciate the support, the attention, Like all actors, I appreciate the attention. But most of all, I think what I appreciate is the connection that we're all part of this organism. We all love the theater. And certainly right now, everybody listening to this podcast, we all love the work of Stephen Sondheim. I would encourage you to write me because I think we're all feeling something that we might not even be able to express in our sense of loss and our sense of celebration. I don't think we should be sad at Steve's passing. I think we should celebrate that we were lucky enough to live in his time and that we were lucky enough to be shaped and formed by his remarkable output, his originality, his daring, his curiosity. All of that affected us. And maybe now is the time for us to reach out to each other and share our feelings, share our grief. I know that I'm still processing it. I'm fine for the better part of a day, but there will be whole moments of just sadness that, for me, just speaking for me, that I never had the opportunity to be, or the comfort. I was never in a comfort zone where I felt I could be closer to him, even though I had those opportunities. That I didn't get to do certain of his shows when he was alive. But man, what a blessing to be able to do the shows that I did do when he was alive. Yeah, and what a blessing to be able to go on and say, oh, you know what? Before my career is over, I could still do that one. And I could still do that one. And I could still do that one. Maybe someone will ask me someday. And if they don't ask me, I can listen to it. I can work on the music.
Yeah, that's right.
I can send an email to Kyle and we can talk about Follies or something like that.
I was going to say, like, you should be cast in the production of Follies.
I would love to do Follies.
Next thing.
Follies is just Follies is just an story. What do you have a favorite show, Kyle? Sometimes that you're willing to share with us at least.
Yeah, like the Plant My Flag, and I mean, Into the Woods is going to be the most special one for me, only because that was like my entry point in a lot of the stuff. So there's kind of like that nostalgic factor to it. But then I start to flip around because it's like, boy, do I think that Assassins is like a very daring piece of theater, and what an interesting subject matter, and the songs in that are beautiful. But having done the deep dives, boy, do I have a deeper respect for Follies, and I find myself listening to that more and more the older I get, because I think that there's some takeaways for me in that. But for me now, at the age of 38, I would say it's kind of that tie between Into the Woods, Sweeney Todd, and Follies are kind of all like fighting for number one for me for very different reasons. Yeah. So,
well, there you go. That gets back to what I was talking about. The canon of his work is sort of an organism itself. I can't put my finger on a single show that I would say is my favorite. I think it changes, honestly, from day to day. The one that had the most impact on me was Pacific Overtures, because that's why I became an actor. But honestly, right now, for the last couple of weeks, even before he died, Company, the score of Company is just making it, cycling through my brain every day. Even those first chords, the da-dum, bump, bump, because I remember how I felt the first time I heard those notes.
Right.
I sat up and something was new, something was different.
Yeah. What is this?
Yeah. So, but I'm sure that'll change, and pretty soon it'll be Into the Woods again, or Folly.
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm just to double back too, like just something that I'm not prescribing this to anyone. This was just like my own thing that I've now started doing, and in part because of his passing and seeing how much he gave back. But when it's in my power, I am now. I just did it actually for the Christmas Carol that I went and saw, of some of the actors that I know that were in that production sending the notes and being like, I think you did a really great job. Like, this was really profound for me coming back to the theater for the first time. And just let me know, because I think that so often we focus on our negative, or we read negative reviews, and it's like nice to be able to like, hey, I have it in my power, and I legitimately mean this positive feedback I want to give, so I might as well give it.
I worked with George Hearn several years ago, and George told me something about Steve that was really remarkable. He said that Steve would never say a bad word about anyone except in very, very close company. And then only one or two people that he'd ever met or worked with. He had a generosity of spirit that he knew was elemental to keeping this organism, this community organism, alive. We all need each other in some way. And that's why I'm saying we all need each other in some way. So if you visit my website, please send me a note, write to me just to say hello sometimes, and I'll write right back.
One last thing, another good thing that we did this re-record, Thom, you were the only person I forgot to ask this question to. So this thing I'm doing for the Sweeney Todd season is, what is your favorite pie?
What is my favorite pie? Well, this is an interesting question, Kyle, because pie making is actually my hobby.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay,
has been since 2005, I think.
There's no missing cats in your neighborhood.
There are no missing cats in my neighborhood,
Okay.
and everyone has all their digits. I have only made a few savory pies, so you're all safe. But now that we're in the holiday season, I do have my own holiday pie that I'm actually kind of that I love making, and that is an apple, walnut, cranberry, ginger pie.
Whoa! Okay.
It's in a shortbread crust, and I kind of love making that one. A couple years ago, I
think I would like eating that one.
Okay, get ready for this. I discovered, I think it was 2 years ago, I did it for a holiday party. It's a chocolate jalapeno pie.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's just made, it's like a dark chocolate pie with a touch of jalapeno.
I love it.
Processed jalapeno in the chocolate. And it's delicious. During the year, my favorite pie to make, though, if I was going to reduce it to one pie, it's strawberry balsamic pie.
Huh.
Yeah.
Like balsamic vinegar.
Balsamic vinegar, yeah. You throw that in with the strawberry.
Oh, interesting.
And anyone out there who's interested in making pies are really easy to make. The trick is not the filling, Mrs. Lovett. The trick is not the filling. The trick is the crust. If you make a bad crust, it doesn't matter how delicious the human flesh is. It's not going to be good. So work on your crust, pie makers.
Thanks, Thom.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Sondheim Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Thank you to the Alberta Podcast Network, to ATB, and to Pod Power this week. Putting It Together is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about greenfinch and linnet bird. Personally, I prefer green eggs and ham. As always, a big thank you to the great Chris Hanaguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and to Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.
At last, my arm is complete again.